Welcome to Weapons of Mass Destruction Podcast, episode 240. David, this week, we're talking tariffs. Your favorite subject.
Tariffs.
You love it.
I've been waiting. Boom. So much
I know
energy
you
for
just
this
said to
fucking
me the
episode.
other day, you're like, Dane, we're 239 episodes in and we
I
haven't
wish
touched
somebody would put a
tariffs.
fucking tariff in it or somewhere. God damn it.
Oh, so yes, unless you've been living under a rock this week, it is the only subject that anybody who's anybody is talking about. And
That no one talked about before, but now everyone's a fucking expert in, right, Dane? Everyone's a fucking expert. Here
everybody's an expert.
Here they are.
Well,
Been studying
fortunately,
tariffs just like me for years. Now they got a bunch of shit to say. Go ahead,
fortunately
sorry.
for the memes, I am a quasi-economics expert because I stayed at a La Quinta Inn last night.
Oh.
But,
Well, I just saved a bunch of money on my car insurance.
so let's give the people a rundown, especially for our non-American listeners who maybe saw some headlines but don't know exactly what's going on. So
I'm talking
Trump,
to the Olses.
all during his campaign, again, this also
Said it was coming.
follows under the category of promises made, promises kept, because he's been talking about this for a long time and he actually did it. The crazy bastard. We have our thoughts on it. We'll get into that. But he has long since viewed tariffs as kind of a double whammy from his point of view. On the one hand, tariffs, and again, this is all in Trump's view, tariffs are a good cudgel to basically get other countries to do other things outside of even economic policy that he wants them to do. So, for example, you might remember in the first couple of weeks of his administration, he used the threat of tariffs to get Mexico to staff and patrol its own border to stem the flow of illegal immigration into the U.S. and fentanyl, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, he used the threat of tariffs to force the Colombian government to take back some illegal immigrants that came to the United States that were criminals and, you know, get them to stay in Colombia, et cetera. So get people to do what he wants them to do. On the other hand, he has a strictly economic view of it is, you know, the United States has basically been taken advantage of around the world from a trade perspective, again, in Trump's view. And one way to rebalance the playing field is to put tariffs on other countries to not only, in his view, make them reciprocal. So if another country tariffs U.S. goods, he wants to do the same amount on their goods, but also incentivize both domestic and foreign investment to reinvest in the United States to create good paying jobs for the American citizens. And the primary one here is like manufacturing, right? That's the big thing that everybody points to is, you know, the Rust Belt here in the United States, the auto industry, starting with Detroit, you know, is kind of emblematic of this, have been gutted by the sort of globalization where cheap labor can be found around the world to do things like manufacturing, while the United States just focus on, you know, higher end, higher education, high paying jobs more so than, you know, the manufacturing blue collar type work. So this is Trump's way of reshoring some of that investment and bringing some of those jobs back. Now, we're going to give you our 2 cents on that, but I just kind of the lay of the land of where his head's at and why he campaigned on these things and why he's following through on it. David, initial thoughts?
Tariffs, I'm aware of what it is. I am aware that they are enacted all around the world. I'm aware that certain countries use them to keep their goods and services on the top of the menu, i.e., let's use, for example, somewhere that may or may not be close to one or two of our hearts is Colombia. Colombia, they charge a heavy fucking tax for any outsourced products that they bring in to force you, well, not force you, but to subtly nudge you towards buying actual Colombian products. And there's nothing wrong with the country doing that. Again, it's kind of like borders. When other countries do it, it's totally fine. But when we do it, somehow, some way, it's got to be some kind of moral crusade against something that causes one side to be Nazis and the other side to be blithering idiots. So, again, I'm just like most people were last week, not experts in tariffs. I'm aware of what the definition is. I am sure that it's beneficial to our country in some form or fashion. Like you said, we said off camera, you said it in that lead in is that Trump might be using this as a bludgeon or a stick or a rod to get these other countries to do something that might not be in their best interest now, but it's in their future to stay on our good side moving forward, so we don't seem like we're taking advantage of. So we're not doing the heavy lifting for all these other countries. And again, with the initiative being to bring jobs back to America too. So I don't see a problem. And especially nowadays, I'm trying to work on we'll see. And what we'll see means is just not reacting in the moment, not buying into the wailing and gnashing of teeth, the running around, the chicken littles, the sky is falling. Let's see. Let's just see what it turns into, because let's not forget, he slapped a bunch of tariffs on a bunch of countries already, and he's already repealed those because those countries said, oh, fuck this. Okay, we'll come to the table. And if that's what he's using it for, then it's much ado about nothing until it's something to be worried about. So let's see what this final tariff act looks like before we start losing our heads and not keeping our composure. That's all I'm saying.
So let's get a few of the preliminary points out of the way.
Right.
First and foremost, tariffs are not paid by the country that they're slapped on. This has been Trump's constant refrain to try to pitch it to his base and people that support him that, if we slap a tariff on China, China pays for it, doesn't affect American consumers whatsoever. That's not accurate because the tariff is paid at the point of import. So every country has net exports and net imports. So within the United States, there are certain companies whose primary business it is to import goods from around the world. And there are other countries whose business it is to export American goods to the rest of the world. The American companies that are in the import business are the ones that pay this price. So if you are a domestic manufacturer of some, a final end product that the American consumer wants to buy, and you source, say, 50% of your product from China, that half of your overall production costs are now going to go up by the amount of tariff that was placed on China. So it is not accurate to say that there will be no consequences suffered by American consumers. The price of goods and services, or more so goods than anything, will go up as a result of this. So that is just, a fact of life that needs to be dealt with. And let's not look through this with rose-colored glasses like Trump wants you to. And, just everything's going to be rainbows and sunshine because, China or Canada or whoever the tariff country is going to pay for it. That's not accurate. Second thing is, from a strict economic analysis standpoint, tariffs are bad, primarily because of the law of comparative advantage. And if I could cliff note this as much as possible, let's say you have country A and country B. Country A is bigger and it's better at everything than country B. So if country A wants to produce 5 different goods and it, segments out its labor force and its capital investment to produce those 5 goods, it will always outperform country B in terms of the quality goods, the quantity, et cetera, et cetera. However, based on the law of comparative advantage, country A would still benefit by allowing country B to specialize in its whatever it does best out of those 5 goods and simply trading with country B, because then country A can take all of its resources and labor and dedicate it to producing the other 4 things even better, because now it's not spending time, money, and resources on that 5th category, and it can produce even more of the other 4 things and trade from the surplus to country B to get that 5th category that country B is doing. So even in a situation where you have a big, super productive country and a tiny little country, whatever that tiny little country can specialize in and do really, really well from its own, perspective, it still is a net benefit to both of those countries for country B to produce whatever that good is and then just simply trade it with country A, because now the collective economic benefit to both country A and country B is you're still going to have enough of the good that country B is producing. Country A is producing even more, and just basic supply and demand. More in the economy means lower prices for everybody in both countries A and B. I hope that wasn't too convoluted. I tried to, keep it as simple as possible. But the key takeaway is even when so in this example, when country A would be the United States. The United States has vast natural resources. It has a massive population. It has tons of capital to invest in producing whatever it wants. But it doesn't make sense for the United States to try to isolate itself from the world economically and say, we're going to produce everything we need only within the United States. Because country B, say, for example, Saudi Arabia, doesn't have near the productive capacity of the United States economy, but they can sure produce the shit out of oil. And so if we say, all right, Saudi Arabia, you focus on producing a whole bunch of oil, and we're going to take the resources we otherwise would have spent on trying to drill the holes deeper here in the United States to pull more oil out, and we're going to take those resources and we're going to develop other things. We're going to develop, cars or pharmaceuticals or whatever, whatever the United States specials in, and then we'll just trade you our surplus from those other goods for oil, right? Saudi Arabia benefits, the United States benefits, and the global standard of living rises. So from a purely economic perspective, I know that's very ivory tower and it's not getting into the nitty day-to-day stuff, which we're getting ready to get into now. From that perspective alone, tariffs are a bad idea. Free trade is a good idea. It raises the standard of living. Just look at any chart about the poverty rate, and you'll see from 10,000 BC up until about the 1800s, the poverty rate was like this. And then, like this, like high, like 80% plus. And then since the advent of global free trade, free markets, capitalism, you've seen in the last 150 years, the poverty rate has collapsed all over the world. So the net benefits of free trade are clear and apparent. That doesn't mean that tariffs don't have other uses, and we're going to get into what Trump's are. So sorry for that filibuster, but that's the Cliff Notes version. We have to be intellectually honest right before we go in and, I guess sort of play devil's advocate and say we see what he's getting at.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we know the definition. That was a nice breakdown, Dane. I want to commend you on that. I learned something, and hopefully the viewers and listeners did too. Now, that being said, let's get into the nitty gritty of this, and let's about face and tell the people what we think about these tariffs.
Yeah. So 5 bullet points, and I'm just going to run through them real quick, and then David and I are just going to riff on them. So what's the play here? What's Trump trying to do? One thing is get tariffs from other countries that were already existing on U.S. goods to come down, right? That's the level of the playing field side of the argument. The other thing is, and this is kind of like 1A and 1B, is to balance trade deficits. So in the Trumpian view of the world, if we import billions of dollars more from China than they import from the United States, that's a trade deficit. And he views trade deficits as that means the other country, in this case China, is taking advantage of the United States. Because in Trump's view, if we import $500 billion of product from China every year, then China should, if they were a fair and balanced trade partner, should import $500 billion of United States goods, right? If we're going to import a bunch of toys and trinkets for our kids, they should import $500 billion worth of wheat from Kansas farmers, so to speak. The third thing is reshoring of manufacturing, right? This is one of the core claims is the United States middle class has been hollowed out because we've lost manufacturing. We don't produce anything in this country anymore. And that's bad for the middle class, again, in Trump's view. And then the fourth thing, the one I'm most partial to, is he's said this a few times, did on the campaign trail and recently, that if everything goes to plan, he would like to replace the income tax with tariffs. So if all federal government revenue, or if not all, most
Checkmate, Dan.
is coming from, I know, right? is coming from tariffs, then we can get rid of the income tax, maybe even abolish the IRS. And so now 30% of your paycheck isn't stolen from you, every time you get a pay stub. So that's the one I want to focus on more. But David, let's get any of those four that you want to riff on first.
Well, first, I want to get into that juicy. I can I could be crass right now, but I'm not going to. I can hear your libertarian blood rushing to a libertarian appendage that may or may not be getting libertarian harder right now with the abolishment of the IRS and the income tax. I mean, shit. I feel like he could have got more out of you, Dane. Is all I'm gonna say. Is like, if all you had to say was yes to tariffs, you would have, in exchange for taxes being abolished, like, you would have given up at least a couple of them. Well,
Yeah.
Let's start with income tax.
Yeah.
You would have given up a couple of amendments, I'm sure, to the Constitution over that shit. Like, this is the worst trade ever. It's like, hey, take Peyton Manning in his prime, and then also I'll throw in a first-round draft pick, and you just give us your second-string running back. It's like, oh, all right, you take him. I don't need him. I didn't even like him.
Yeah.
He looked at me funny once. But anyway, go ahead, Dane.
Well, it's not all roses and sunshine, because a tariff can be viewed as a tax on the American people. It's just another form of it, because again, it's paid directly by the importer, so that person is being hit with it very directly. And then the rest of us are hit with it through the rise in prices of consumer goods. So our dollar doesn't go as far as it did before in the no tariff environment. So
hence
in that
them
sense,
saying, all your eggs are going to cost more. He's doing the opposite. You guys are idiots. Yeah,
So in that sense, it's not like, a tariff means an elimination of another tax. But I will caveat what I just said with, in the hierarchy of taxes, right? So think about all the taxes. You have sales tax, you have use tax, you have income tax, you have death tax, you have,
that's right. You can't even die.
Tax.
They're gonna get their blood money from you too.
You can't even leave right? This their favorite thing. If you don't like it, why don't you just leave the country? The United States has an exit tax. If you want to leave the country,
you didn't tell us you were gonna die, son of a bitch.
Hell, even if you want to leave and if you want to live and just live, if you want to not die but move to a different country, you got to sell all your U.S. assets and pay a tax on that before you go.
Yeah, motherfucker, it's like Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like.
So
you're not leaving with any of our shit, that's for sure.
So of all of those different types of taxes, right, there is a strong debate to be had about which is the most corrosive and coercive of general human liberty and freedom, right? And for my money, one of the highest is income tax, right? Because income tax
hurts the individual.
It is.
A lot of them do, but
in no uncertain terms, it's slavery, right? If you take 100% of what somebody makes, that's classic chattel slavery that we all know about from our history books. Well, what if you only take 90% and leave him 10? Is it still slavery?
That just sounds like slavery
yes.
with extra steps.
Most people would say yes, leaving him only 10% is still slavery. Well, what about if we reduced it to 70 and you left him 30?
How much?
Right?
How much is slavery? How much? Now we're getting down to the brass tacks of it all.
Exactly. You see the intuition of the argument. If you're trying to say that 30% of all of your labor belongs to the government more than it belongs to you, the person that earned it, this is what income tax is. If you're not saying it's the exact same as chattel slavery, you're still saying 30% of your livelihood, right? You only have one physical body and can only trade so many hours of your day to acquire money to pay for food, clothing, shelter, your kids, et cetera, et cetera. And the government is saying that they have a higher claim to 30% of everything you earn than you do. By any other definition, without mincing words, that's slavery. So in terms of the hierarchy, I would say, it's a pretty close tie between income tax and property tax, right? Because you pay off a home, you don't owe anybody anything. And then if you don't pay your property taxes, the government can come and take your property from you.
Oh, wait,
that's more. Pretty coercive. So I say all of that to say this. Even if the tariff is a tax, and it is less corrosive to individual liberty than taking 30% of your paycheck in terms of income tax. But here's the rub. And this is the point that I've made repeatedly about Trump's whole tariff in replace of income tax thing is you can't have one and not follow through on the other. If you raise tariffs and don't touch income taxes or don't reduce them enough, obviously zero is ideal, but even if you don't get zero, you need to reduce them enough to offset the loss in purchasing power of the dollar from the increase in tariffs, right? So let's say, just say broadly speaking, the tariffs raise the cost of all consumer goods across the board for American consumers by 10%. Well, then you need to leave 10% more in the people's paychecks from their income tax at minimum just to break even. Now, if you only raise all goods by 10% and you reduce the income tax to zero, now we're cooking with gasoline. Now that's, a policy that I can get behind in that sense, because that's good. But what I fear is he's doing the tariffs first. They've already taken effect. And that because Congress doesn't get behind him, or he doesn't have the stomach to spend the political capital to do it, he doesn't follow through on the substantial reduction, if not elimination, of income tax, we're all going to be worse off. And that's my problem with the whole wait and see method of this is the tariffs have already happened. We're already feeling the impacts of that. Will we get the income reduction benefits? That remains to be seen. I would rather get my benefit, as everybody would, right? Give me my benefit on the front end. Get rid of the income taxes first, then do your tariffs
as a show of good faith. And then we won't shit on you so much when you put the tariffs on.
So that's my concern with that whole aspect.
Yeah, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, isn't it, Dane?
Yeah.
So he's slapping them tariffs he's slapping them like they're a fucking newborn baby's butt. Like he's just slapping them all over the place. You say no, he's a tariff. So anyway, all right. So what's the next point you want to demolish before we
or just
cancel our culture?
Discuss the reshoring. So the concept of bringing American manufacturing back.
Okay. That's an interesting way to phrase it. Reshoring.
Yeah. Reshoring American jobs, capital, investment.
It sounds good
in the American economy.
But I also heard that part of his reshoring over here was that he was going to replace the American workers. The complaint is that the reason that we outsourced it, if you're been living under a rock for the last 30 years, is that we made it was it NAFTA? It was NAFTA, right? That we
within the Western Hemisphere specifically,
yeah. So basically we made it okay to take slave labor as long as it wasn't in our country. Long and short of it, take from that what you will. So we've been outsourcing all of our manufacturing jobs clearly to other countries that have, let's call it less or more lax laws on child labor and labor in general and how much they should pay you. So we've been getting cheap labor on our goods for a long time. And obviously, economists, when he said he was going to tariff these other places and bring and reshore these jobs, as Dane succinctly put it. Jesus, I kept trying to say sequential. I was like, what the fuck? That doesn't work. Anyway, they were saying, well, how are you going to pay the American worker what they pay over there? He's like, well, I'm not going to. I can't because there's laws against that. And they go, okay, well, so that's an uptick in labor charge. How is this not going to be directly affected on the price of the product? And he said to placate them that he was going to replace the manufacturing jobs with robots. So you're not technically, the problem with that is that you're not technically hiring. They better be American robots, goddammit. Like they better be made here and there better be other guys making the goddamn robots to make those reshored jobs. But that's another problem. So again, it's like, is he doing the right thing or is he telling us what we want to hear and just kind of hoping that shit works out? I pop it over to you, Dane.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and this is pure speculation on my part, I think the long game on that is there will be a struggle between the government and the businesses that use all the robots. And basically they're going to start taxing the robots like labor. And so they're going to give companies an option. They're going to say, all right, if you use a human labor force, we're not going to slap X, Y, or Z tax on it, but they're going to come up with a new type of tax to be like, all right, you can hire a bunch of robots, but per robot, we're going to tax you so much an hour, a week, or whatever the productivity match is, which again, isn't a magic bullet, doesn't solve the problem because again, people still do.
Can that just be an electricity tax or something? Like, can we just hit them harder on their electric bill? Like,
again, it could take all kinds of different forms, but that still doesn't solve the fundamental problem of
you didn't rehire an American.
But like it or not, just human beings in general need things to do, right?
Yeah.
Idle hands are the devil's
Purpose.
playground. And that's not just a moralistic statement, but that's like, there's tons of psychological study on this about like people that like don't do anything have sort of harmful impacts to their mental health and stuff like that. So, even if you try to solve for the economic issue of these people not having jobs, you're still going to have to find something for them to do to find purpose in their life, like David was saying. So that's that part. Now, here's where I'm going to agree full-heartedly with David's whole wait and see approach on this particular topic of bringing manufacturing back to the United States. So we have the economic theory aspect, the comparative advantage that we went over. And that would say, yeah, let the manufacturing go overseas, because if they can do it for cheaper, then when we get the goods back in the United States, it's cheaper for us. So the American consumer wins. However, the economic reality versus the economic theory of that is you can paint yourself into a corner that's really tough to get out of. So 2 examples. One, I think it's like 93% of all antibiotics used in the United States are manufactured in China. Now, if you think about that for a nanosecond, that's a problem. Especially if your government, the United States government, is constantly saber rattling and calling China its enemy. If you need an antibiotic, you need that thing. And if your foreign adversary wants to turn off the flow of antibiotics, that's a problem.
You're going to have a bad time.
Now, the other thing, again, also ties in with China, but again,
well,
go ahead with the antibiotic.
And if you think we're fucking around, if you think that's the only aspect, it's not. Remember back in 2018 when that Category 5 hurricane hit Puerto Rico? Yeah. Did you know what Puerto Rico was known for? It accounted for 95% of all the IVs in the world. They manufacture 95% of all I almost called liquid IV, but of all the IV bags in the world. So naturally, what happened? All of a sudden, there's shortages. All of a sudden, nobody can get a hold of IVs. I keep trying to say liquid IV. God damn it. This isn't a commercial for them. God damn it. Anyway, to your point. So if you think, oh, well, that'll never happen. It did. And we were just lucky that it was IVs and that it wasn't during, a medical crisis, a global medical crisis. So
yeah,
it can happen. Back over to you, Dan.
And another example, this also ties in with China, but again, China's not the only one. We have these sort of bottleneck situations on critical goods that, we need for the American economy, is semiconductors, chips. The largest manufacturer by market share by far in the world is TSMC, and TSMC is based in Taiwan. It stands for Taiwan Semiconductor Corporation, maybe is what the C stands for. But anyway, like that's what they do.
Nancy Pelosi went over there?
Yeah. And so what semiconductor chips are, those are the things that go into the computers for our everyday lives. So your EVs, your cell phone, all sorts of medical applications, computers, like you name it. In the digital world that we live in today, semiconductors are absolutely indispensable. And I forget what the percentage is on that, but I'm pretty sure it's north of 90% there too. Now, Taiwan is not strictly, as of this date, under China's control, but it's like right there in its backyard. It's like it's China's Puerto Rico, so to speak, not from a hostile perspective, but if the United States said, all right, Puerto Rico, we're coming in and setting up shop, China's not going to be able to sell halfway around the world and stop us. I don't care how strong.
Watch over here.
I don't care how
the
strong
mood is tense.
the American war hawks, think that they are. You are not sailing a fleet around the world, and you're going to stop China from taking Taiwan if they want it tomorrow.
That's like
it's just ain't going to happen.
That's
and
like
if you
saying
try, you're going to kick off World War III.
That's like if America wanted to take Cuba, and Russia's like, no, we can stop this. Like,
yeah,
okay. You can try, but it's 90 miles away and we've got all this shit right here. And by the way, China's all this shit is billions and billions of people.
Yeah.
So
listen, from a strictly comparative advantage perspective, it probably makes sense, and this is probably why it worked out this way, to have China produce the antibiotics and to have the vast majority of the semiconductors made in Taiwan.
In a business standard, yeah. Not in a common sense standard. Right.
Because if they can do it cheap and it contributes to the global, standard of living and, it's working out for everybody during peacetime, fantastic. But two things that you don't want to lose out on if you get into a war is antibiotics and semiconductors.
Well, nowadays, I was going to say bullets and bandages, but times have changed a little bit, but all right.
So from the perspective of reshoring, no matter what the law of comparative advantage says, that's an economic reality that is worth addressing. So that's not me, full-throatedly supporting tariffs as the way to go about this. I think there's other better ways to do it. My view, if Dane were elected president, first of all, the lefties would be wishing for Trump to come back. But second of all, how I would incentivize American manufacturing to come back and, semiconductor plants to be built in America and all of that kind of stuff is I would eliminate the corporate tax to zero, first of all. And I would give prospective incentives on other taxes to say, listen, if you're a company that, let's say Texas Instruments, right, makes all the calculators we had in school. If they have the wherewithal and the ability to create a semiconductor plant in Texas, I would say not only is your corporate tax zero, but if you invest in building a semiconductor plant here in Texas, I will, eliminate all taxes on all products that go into the production of those semiconductors for a period of, say, 10 years until you recoup the investment on your plant, right? Really incentivizing, not through taking, not through raising the price of consumer goods, but incentivizing the people with the capability and the know-how to produce these things here in America, incentivizing them to build in America by saying, I'm going to take less of what you produce as the government so that you build it here. That's the way to incentivize reshoring that's better than tariffs. But again, nobody wants to have that conversation and I'm way too radical. That's the way I would do it. But short of President Dane getting elected, if Trump is able to reduce those bottlenecks a little bit by bringing some of that back to the United States with tariffs, the incentives, again, my incentives are the carrot, Trump's incentives are the stick. If the stick works and it makes us slightly less vulnerable in those, perspectives, then, it's not all negative, I should say.
Right. And to tack on to a positive thing or a positive note is that, again, we're going to go back to what we were talking about a couple of episodes ago. I'm not going to throw out the name or the episode number, but what we were talking about was Trump. And it seems like Trump's only legacy or the only thing that's really driving him right now is to be the best president or be the most memorable president or whatever you want to call. So I don't think Trump likes having his name besmirched. So I'm going to go ahead and assume he's not willing to just tank this entire country on a fucking argument that he had with Obama. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that he's going to try to do the best that he can for this country and make himself look as good as he possibly can. And if he can he's the one that wrote the art of the deal. And if he can do the art of the deal as his foreign policy and we end up better down the road for it, I'm here for it. But all that being said is the path to hell is paved with good intentions. So he might be doing this thinking that it's going to work and it might blow up in his face. But at least we know that he didn't start this with the intent to just blow it all up like the left is making it sound like this week. They're making it sound like he's undoing every economic policy that we've ever had, and it's going to lead to financial ruin. And again, when you catch yourself feeling like Chicken Little, pump the brakes, take a breath, and then just maybe wait and see what happens. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think that's a good place to end it because regardless of whether you agree with us, disagree with us, or anybody else talking about this subject, I hope you come out of this episode with, a few more weapons, so to speak, in your toolbox of being able to have an informed opinion on this subject. But B, what David said there is exactly spot on, is this is a long-term play, right? It is short-term pain, but if it works out, and again, we have these competing interests of perfect theoretical economic policy and practical reality economic policy, and there is a balance there. And we're not going to know how this plays out until we know. And we're not going to find out in 2 weeks or 2 months or probably even 2 years. This is probably at minimum a 5-year play, and it could be 10 years or longer. Not saying that the tariffs have to stay in place for that long, but really this is an ambitious attempt by Trump to completely alter the global trade order that has existed basically since the end of World War II. So he's trying to completely reshuffle the deck of cards. And as with anything, there is inertia that needs to be overcome in order to get the ball rolling in that direction. Again, that's not to say that tariffs are a good idea or that we full-throatedly support them, but to say that if this is going to be attempted, and if the argument is that in the long run, this is going to level the trade playing field and America is going to be, more secure in the sense that it's not so reliant on some of these critical goods that we just talked about, and all of the other factors that go into it. This isn't something for, people with weak stomachs to lose over. Because I'll say this, that this isn't universally good or universally bad, but if the American people don't have the stomach to stick this out, and what I'm specifically referring to is next year's midterm elections. The Republicans lose the House, and Trump is basically having to go into his last 2 years, fighting tooth and nail with the Democrats to get anything done. This whole policy is DOA because they will throw up roadblock after roadblock, and it's just not going to happen. Now. And listen, I mean, we made the points while Biden was president, and they were just as accurate then as it is now. Is people talk about, women's rights or trans issues and all these social, issues more than anything in the world. People vote with their pocketbooks. And if they feel pain, they will just reflexively go to the other side. Doesn't matter how much logic or reason you hit them with. Doesn't matter how much you correctly point out to them that it'll be worse. The reason why Trump won this go around, almost more than anything else, was the destruction to the American economy that the COVID policies caused, and that the inflation that proved not to be transitory and, continue all the way into 2024, which gave Trump the leg up to say, well, I'm not a continuation of those guys. It's good for the goose is good for the gander. If the economic hardship, if the American people don't have the stomach for it, and they make him lose the House in 2026, and things don't improve by 2028, you're going to have another Democrat in the White House in 2028, and all this is going backwards. So that's just the lay of the land. That's not even partisan one way or another. That's just saying, if you want to see if this works, you got to let it play out. So
put it this way,
we'll see where it goes, but it's a long-term play.
And my thing here is, if I could just tack that on, when everything was going green and you kept hearing like, oh, there's no recession. Oh, and then you'd hear, oh, there might be. Oh, it's a soft landing. You have to know, if you paid attention to any of the meme stocks like AMC or GameStop, they pull fucking levers. They pull bullshit. They cheat. They've been kicking the can down the road for years now. You cannot print 40% of the money that's ever existed and not pay a heavy fucking toll. And we haven't paid the heavy fucking toll. So this is us taking our medicine, and I can guarantee you, it's going to be hard on the people that don't have the money, and the people that do have the money are going to be telling the people that are struggling, this is why you can't vote for this guy ever again. You need to get him out. Like Dan said, it's like, do you have the stomach to take your medicine so that your children, our generation always complain about it. The generation before us motherfucked us financially. And now they're telling us and shitting all over us. Well, we could be the bigger generation and eat some crow that our parents and potentially our grandparents should have eaten. And we can be the generation that got back on track. That we might be the only generation that can outperform our parents in America, but we can damn sure make sure that we're the last one, at least for a couple of generations, that our children do outperform us. And we aren't and we don't pass the buck down to them. That's basically what it is. Take it today so your children will do better tomorrow. That's what this is.
It's that old adage, right? Society grows great when men plant trees under whose shade they know they will never sit. Right? You got to do hard things and take medicine sometime, even if you're not the one that caused the problem. You know, this is a bit apples and oranges, but like Argentina, right? Milei came in saying it's going to get worse before it gets better. And now, about a year and a half into his presidency, you know, lightning speed from their perspective. I saw a report the other day that poverty has now fallen by 14% in Argentina, like absolute poverty, which is the lowest level it's been since like, I don't know, like 2017 or 2018. And things are looking up for Argentinians compared to the trajectory they were on and the ruling class that was in before them. You know, obviously, again, inertia works both ways. If you get inertia going in the right direction, it can be a big, big help for you. But it's also tough to overcome inertia in terms of the negative. And with the size of the United States economy, if all the inertia is pushing in the direction of funneling all the money to the top, hollowing out the middle class, you know, spending trillions of dollars a year, bombing people all around the world instead of actually investing and doing productive stuff here in the United States, et cetera, that's a lot of inertia moving in the wrong direction. And so to stop that train, let alone reverse its course, is going to take a Herculean task.
There we go. Nice.
Yeah, that's a toughie. Herculean task. And again, it's going to take some intestinal fortitude to be able to get through the rougher times to get to the other side of the time. So, or to get to the better times. So we'll see how it plays out. We'll see if he even gets another year. Like I said, the midterm elections are going to be huge this go around in terms of whether or not this program continues long enough to see what can be done with it. But again, we'll see. We will see. That's the theme of the episode. We will see.
Should be the theme of the episode right there. Right, exactly. All right, Dane, where can they find this episode of Weapons of Meme Destruction?
They can find this episode at WMDpodcast.com/240. They can get the audio only on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. They can get the video on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and X. While you're over at WMDpodcast.com, make sure to join our email list while you're over there to always stay in contact with the show. Check out the Support Our Work tab for all the ways you can donate to us on a monthly recurring or one-time donation of any amount. But also while you're there, well, actually not while you're there, while you're at all the other platforms, like, subscribe, share, turn on the notifications, get in the comment section, and more importantly, or in addition to all that, just tell friends and family about us. Help grow the Sane Space
organically.
Make it a little bit bigger so that we can get
this
some
podcast farm to table.
Yeah, advertisers on here to throw us some coins so that you don't have to. Although we'd appreciate it if you did. So with that being said, David, 241 next week. What are we throwing at the people?
Can
you predict the future?
Hold on, I have a feeling. Trump's going to do something else that's going to ruin the country. And we're going to have to cooler heads will prevail. And one side will think Armageddon is happening and he's a Nazi. And the other side will think that he's the Messiah. And we'll have to bring y'all back down to earth and say, it's probably not either. But that's just my prediction. You get in the comments and give me yours. And until next week, guys, stay safe. But more importantly, stay free.